Hey guys, let's quickly go over how to use the equipment comparison calculator I made for DFO. It's mostly straightforward. It's strictly for calculating raw damage differences between two pieces of equipment, and it can be a little confusing when it comes to things like equipment options and damage value, especially if you haven't really looked too far into it yet, but it's not too difficult. But keep in mind that it doesn't take into consideration things like cooldown reduction, cooldown recovery, skill levels, and options that don't really have 100% uptime, say 20-second duration, 30-second cooldown. You'll kind of have to estimate how much of a damage increase that's giving you, but that can be a little difficult, so I will probably not cover that in this video. Overall, you could just follow these instructions here, and I'm going to go ahead and just show you what these each mean. So number one, enter the training room. And I'm in there. I'm in the training room. I'm my monk. Number two, unequip the equipment slot to be compared. So for example, let's say I'm in Archon and I was using manipulation. And let's say I want to maybe consider transferring or upgrading into this Deep Diver Air Pack. So what you can do is unequip that slot and open your details page, and you'll see your damage value and your damage value percentage here. Those are going to be important. I also have Ice Bloom and other things, so I'm going to go ahead and stack up all my effects. Looks like I'm good. And that will leave me at 259,684 DV. I'm going to put an equal sign here because I also know that I have a shoulder fusion here that gives me another 3,756 DV. And I'm going to be using this shoulder with both shoulders anyway, so I'm going to have that much DV extra. We'll put that in there. Elemental damage, the shoulder fusion doesn't give any LE damage, but I do have 309 at base, so I'll put that in. So the total is shown here, but just in case you want to tweak it later, you could do this manually. So title, I have an 18% title. I have a 20% creature, but I also have a 3% artifact right here, 3%. And 20%. I have a 10% aura. And if you do have one, if you have a Blona sub-equip enchant, put in 3% here as well. So I have a total of 54%, and yes, that is correct in-game as well. So that's done. And then number 5, input the base values for the original equipment. So for example, let's say I am starting with a manipulation. I'm looking at the base numbers at level 1. So damage value at option level 1 for option 1 is 1,078. I'm going to put an equal sign here because, again, option 1 also gives me another 2,223 DV for a total of 3,301. Option 1 also gives me 10% skill attack. I'm going to put that in there. And then down the list, option 2, all the way at the top right, is 1,078. And then 1,186 for 3 and 4. And that's it. This is manipulation. You can see it's giving me a 15% damage increase just for having that equipped. I am not taking into consideration option level skill attack increases. So for example, these pants are not 320 yet, they're still 280. So they're giving me 2% skill attack. That is not going to be taken into consideration because ideally your shoulders will have the same option levels anyway. Or rather, this version of the calculator assumes that it's going to be at 320, so that's going to be a non-factor. And so, moving on to the Deep Diver Air Pack, input base values for the new equipment is my Deep Diver Air Pack. At option level 1, this gives me 484, I'm sorry, that's the wrong number, 889 DV for option 1. But again, I'm going to put an equal sign here and put a plus because it's 889 plus 8460 on option 1. I'm sorry, that's the wrong number. 2964 DV. That was close. For a total of 3,853 DV. And that's all that option 1 gives me. Option 2 gives me 296 DV at level 1. And then option 3 is 1186. And option 4 is 1630. Option 2 also gives me 40 LE damage. And then both options 3 and 4 give me 15. So you can see right here, just from these alone, my Deep Diver Air Pack is giving me a 2.86% damage increase over manipulation at my current stats. And that is That's a fairly large increase. On top of that, I also get 20% to all speeds on this thing, and I'm using speed shoes with Archon, and yeah, that's very nice. Not only do I get a damage increase, I also get speed, so that means I don't have to sacrifice damage on other slots to achieve the 140% speed requirement for option 1. So that's cool. And that's it. That's really all it is. I am done. And you can tweak these numbers. Let's say, you know, maybe you get some more options, or you change some options around and you end up with maybe 280,000 BV, or maybe you get some really good enchants or something and you end up with 330 LE damage. And you can see how much of a damage difference that'll make at different numbers. And let's say maybe you get a new creature artifact, maybe you get a 4% one, and see how that changes your damage difference numbers. So that's that. But let me show you now what it looks like when you're playing a status damage character, say this weapon master using a bleed bracelet. So again, let's go to the training center. I'm gonna go ahead and zero all of these boxes real quick, just in case. And of course, if you're using the calculator, only touch these white boxes. Do not touch the gray or the green boxes. You can touch this one in theory, but this is just summing all of these, so I would recommend you to just do these manually, but ultimately it's up to you. You could just not use these and just replace the total line here. Either way, same thing. I'm gonna go ahead and, for example, compare sub-equips. I have this optical combat glasses and this sub here. And so I'm going to go ahead and make sure I have stacked all my equipment options and my ice plume infusion and stuff like that. And looks like that's it. So my damage value is sitting at 222,543. Again, I'm going to put an equal sign here because I have a sub-equip fusion that gives me another 2,350, which isn't a lot, but you know, just for the sake of. And then elemental damage, I am sitting at 332. Well, there, 332. I have an 18% title. My creature is actually only 10% here, and I have an artifact that gives me another 8%, another artifact that gives me 3%, so in total I have 21%. My aura is 10%, and I do in fact have the Blona sub-equip enchant here. So for a total of 52%, I know it says 49, but if I had this equipped, it'd be 52. As for base conversion, I am using the bleed bracelet, and that is it. I am not using an Ent ring with conversion on it, so I just have 50% bleed conversion. Now keep in mind that if you're playing a class like Female Brawler, Apply Poison already converts about half of your damage, and so the Poison Bracelet converts the remaining half, roughly, so you'll end up somewhere around 74 to 76% poison conversion. But things get a little messy because of how that works and how that affects the calculations, so I can make another video if necessary, explaining how to use this calculator for specifically Female Brawler. It gets a little weird, but it's doable. Now, apart from that, if you're just using a normal character with just a bracelet, for example, this is fairly easy. Base status damage, the bracelet already comes with 20%, 10% on option 4, and 10% on option 1. I also have a blue barrel top with 30% for a total of 50% base status damage with all the equipped stuff, not including any of these pieces here. Now, bonus status damage is a built-in in-game mechanic. So for bleed, right now, if you have 10 stacks of bleed on an enemy, they take another 10% extra bleed damage. Now this is actually multiplicative with everything. This is not additive with your total status damage. It's not increasing your status damage to 60%. This is actually just another 10% on top of it. So this is really only important if you're getting more conversion from an entering or etc. But because I am not really a factor. So still a good thing to put it in here. After the Celestia update, Poison will also get 10%, 2% per stack up to 5 stacks. Shock will get 5% as well. And Burn also gets a damage increase when you freeze an enemy to detonate all the accrued burn damage, but it is kind of hard to calculate because there are a lot of variables involved. Things like burn duration, how often you're freezing an enemy or able to freeze an enemy on average, whether you're using certain detonation increase options and stuff like that. It gets messy, especially at Celeste, but I would say you could probably just put in 10% there and it'll be probably fine. Either way, with all that said, now I can finally go ahead and start inputting values for these. So combat glasses, these are already level 1, so it's fine. 1078 for option 1. And I'm also getting 5% skill attack in option 1. Assuming you have 1080% total equipment quality. And option 2 is giving me 1078 again, but I'm going to put an equal sign here because I know option 2 also gives me another 3557 DV when this piece of equipment is above or at least 90% equipment quality. 3557 for a total of 4635. And then option 3 and 4 are both 10186. And that's it. And you can see combat glasses giving me about 13.6% damage increase by itself. That's great. And then the Ent sub. So again, option level 1 for option 1 is 889. Just looking at base values, option 2 is 445, and then the rest are 445 as well. And here we have 15% bleeding damage if your combined elemental resistances are at least 250. And you can see my resistances, if you add them up, are well above 250 right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put in 15% status damage. And then I get 5% skill attack on shocked, bleeding, and burned enemies, which I can reliably do. That is wrong, 5%. And you can see here, this sub-equip, compared to optical combat glasses, which are fantastic already, is giving me a solid 9% damage increase at full 320s. And that is incredible. That is crazy. That's a huge damage increase. And this is why special equipment are very, very good for customs. Large damage increase, no utility whatsoever usually, but you could build that elsewhere, right? Now, let's say I don't have 15% bleeding damage. Let's say I only have the 3 skill tech lines. That is still a 2.8% damage increase. And that's assuming this is a dead line with just low DV options, right? Let's say I had the 50% status damage, but I did not have 2 of these skill tech options. It's just a 2 out of 4, and maybe like, I don't know, like 15 LE damage. Still a 1.49% damage increase. Maybe I don't even have that, and then I lose damage. And you know, you can kind of just tweak with this. You can figure out what options are worth transferring over. Some lines, for example, that are kind of, in my opinion, underrated. And Spirit, let's say the Ent sub, if you're an Archon, for example. A lot of people kind of just think that this one, 4% skill attack, is not that good, because it's less than 5% on the status options. But if you look at the base DV, it is 1,334, well above these lines that give you 5% skill attack on poisoned enemies, etc. These are only 445. So the base DV basically makes up for the fact that it's missing 1% skill attack. On top of that, you have things like, say, where is it? This one? Yeah. This is base 1186 DV, and if you're below 40% HP, 3112 DV. This can give you some ridiculous DV numbers, and sure, later on DV can get diluted, especially in Archon, but that is still basically about the same as a 5% skill attack option. So definitely keep your eyes on that too. And that's it. That's how that works. And now one more thing. Custom damage values. So the problem with this calculator by itself is that it assumes you're going to be at full 320s. But let's say you want to see how much of a damage increase you'll get right now. So that's what this second tab is for, custom damage values. You can see the instructions are very slightly different. So let's say you don't have full 320s and you don't think you will for a while, but you still want to see if it's worth transferring something right now. So, for example, let's take my Elemental Bomber here using a normal Archon build, but I plan to switch to a Berserk build at some point, especially after I transfer a ring to this character. And so maybe we can look at how much of a damage increase or damage loss I'll get from something like, sure, Death-Ridden Armor as opposed to Reversible Leather Coat. And Death-Ridden Armor isn't actually that powerful, but it's key to the Berserk build, right? So what you can do is, if you don't have option levels on the second top, use this function right here in the training room, fix equipment performance. And what this will do is, this will keep the option levels and everything from your original piece, and when you swap, it'll put them over here as well as your amps, your enchants, and your fusion too. So if I just unequip it, you'll see the option levels go back to normal, but if I re-equip it, it'll use the original pieces of equipment as a base. So that's really neat. So first of all, let's go ahead and unequip this to look at my DV. Let's go ahead and stack up everything I need to. I don't really know how much there is to stack. Not much. But you can see I have 251762 DV. Again, I'm going to put an equal sign here. 251762. And I have a top fusion that gives me 5311 DV. Oops, there we go. And I have 245 fire damage. I have a 10% DV title, don't worry about it. I have a... Jesus, I have a 7% DV creature, I need to upgrade that at some point. I have a 5% DV aura. And I do not have a Blona enchant on my sub. But I do have this 2% DV creature artifact. I'm going to go ahead and make this a 9%. I am not using status damage, and I'll leave those at 0. And now let's compare the tops. So, for example, Reversible Leather Coat. Instead of using the base values now, I want to use the current values, right? So I'm going to put in these purple numbers. So option 1, 5955. 5955. Option 2 gives me 5955 as well. But I also get 5% skill tech and 20 LE damage. Option 3 gives me 2697. And option 4 gives me 3082. So that's a fairly powerful piece by itself. 14.45% damage increase from this top. So now let's switch to the Death-Ridden Armor, which is not useful for Archon, but just for the sake of example. Option 1 will now give me 2802. Option 2 will give me 2802 as well. But option 2 will also give me 5% skill attack. If I use enough cubes, and then let's just assume I will have the whole setup here. Option 3 will give me 3082, and so will option 4. And you can see I actually lose a fair amount of damage if I switch just these two pieces. And this is, again, at my current DV value and not at full 320s. So that is something you can take into consideration if you ever need that. And even though I do lose, quote-unquote, 6% damage, it's going to be a totally different build, so not really worth comparing these two particular pieces. But let's just say you have a sub-equip that you have some low option levels on, and you don't really want to like actually transfer them over to see what the numbers will be. You just use the training room function to kind of just get a ballpark estimate. Actually, it's going to be exact if you just transfer the levels and not feed it, but all that aside. This is a great way to just do that for current damage value and current elemental damage values at any point, as opposed to just endgame. And that's about it. Nothing really changes otherwise. But if you do have questions, please feel free to ask. And again, the link to this calculator will be in the description. And of course, I highly recommend you please make a copy of the calculator for your own use so that other people can download this as well. And that's it. Hopefully this helps you. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to comment or find me in game or join my Discord server and ask me there. I'd be glad to help. Good luck and happy games. Cheers.